Going live, and we are here once again another week. Really great hardcore fight fan week. Probably not the best for the casual observers, but let's start without a fight. Let's start with kind of some big news that I kind of left out that I didn't tell you about, but I'm sure you've caught a little bit of it. Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford have started their press tour for their Netflix fight on September 13th, I believe is the date. What were your thoughts on? Did you catch any of these, and what are your thoughts seeing them side by side?
I've seen clips, and my initial thought of seeing them side by side was they look more similar in size and stature than I would have expected. And I know Terence has been bulking up, but even just their frames look relatively well matched. They looked like two guys that were of similar size and stature, and frankly, that was a little bit surprising to me. Particularly in light of the skull fight, man, I don't see how you don't give Terence a chance in this fight. I definitely lean Canelo, but there was something about seeing them next to each other and not seeing one guy dwarf the other or look inherently different than the other. That just sort of reaffirmed that, like, you know what? Terence has a chance here.
I've been saying this for a while, and you've been the guy kind of pushing back on me. I don't think Canelo is a motivated fighter anymore. I think he likes the checks that come with boxing. I don't see that killer instinct. I think he at times could have possibly looked for a stoppage against Munguia and didn't look for it. I don't see the same guy that we saw during that 2018 to 2021 run. Since the Bivol fight, I've seen Canelo do more of a businessman approach. And I feel like he's taking this fight as the bigger guy. It's a good payday, but I don't see the hunger coming into a generational fight. This is a battle of the two best fighters basically since the COVID pandemic. You've got the guy with the generational legacy winning over Golovkin, going into the pandemic, becomes undisputed champion, becomes the biggest credentials in the sport, biggest name in the sport, Canelo. And then you have Crawford, who went on to defeat Errol Spence Jr., which you could make the case was the most meaningful fight outside of Usyk and Fury for a casual fan. It was for the best welterweight since Floyd Mayweather, essentially. And you're seeing them come at each other. And even when Canelo pushed Crawford today on the stage, it was Terence who kind of had the bully attitude of pushing forward and not backing down. To me, Canelo looks like a guy who's going to work. I don't see that competitive fire anymore.
Well, I think I agree more now than I did a couple of years ago. I think that has definitely changed and shifted, but he's always kind of looked like a guy going to work. He's always had a cool, calm, collected demeanor, unless he gets hot, which he does get hot now and then. He's a pretty laid back customer for the most part. So I don't know that I see that as a sign of a loss of competitive edge from Canelo, but the performances kind of speak for themselves, right? Like, there was a certain point in Manny Pacquiao's career where he was still putting on good performances, but that killer wasn't there to the same extent. And I think that's the point of his career that Canelo's in right now.
I just Terence looks. So Charlo looked bigger than Canelo, but physically you could see Canelo had a wider back. To me, it was the size of their backs look similar. I don't care about height. Yeah. All these guys, this is best illustrated by Paulie Malignaggi versus Adrian Broner. I heard a lot of people say Paulie was bigger than Broner. Paulie was taller than Broner. He wasn't bigger than Broner. Broner was a physically bigger man. His skeleton held more mass and weight. And because of that, I think that, like, a lot of times people just look strictly as height. Jermell Charlo, when he fought Canelo, to me never looked like the bigger man. He looked like the taller man. What struck me was Crawford looked like a comparable sized man with a thick back.
Yeah, I agree.
And physicality. Do you get what I'm saying?
I agree. And then that was a thing that changed for me. Now, I still will be honest. I'm still favoring Canelo. I think that what two guys look like visually and how that sizes up on the ring after a weight cut and then a bulk back up the day before, how they handle the power. There's all these other intangibles that go into size in a boxing ring outside of what two guys look like next to each other. But a lot of times when that discrepancy is there and it's big, it's very obvious and notable. And it wasn't in this case.
And the temperament. I think the fact that Crawford looked at him as a guy that was the same size as him, you didn't see someone that was up there going, man, this guy's so much bigger than me. I think Crawford's going into this, sure, he's bulking, but he's looking at this guy as the same size as him. He's not looking at this as a novelty attraction fight.
Yeah, I think ultimately where we'll see the size discrepancy too is in their legs. And I think that Canelo will have the bigger, thicker legs, which is going to lead to more destructive power. Terrence has never been hit like this in his life, I'm pretty sure, not in a professional ring. And so those are other intangibles that will play into it. But I see Terrence's, whereas I would have leaned Canelo heavily, I look at it as like a 60-40 type of fight now.
I think Terrence is going to beat him, and I think Terrence drops him in the fight. That's what I'm thinking. I think Terrence is going to drop him. I think Terrence is going to probably school him.
You think Terrence's power is going to have any sort? I just don't see Terrence being able to bother Canelo. Maybe it's a speed knockdown, but if you can go to 12 rounds with Dmitry Bivol and Jaime Munguia and Sergey Kovalev, I just don't see how Terrence Crawford's punching power is going to surprise.
I think it's going to be a timing thing.
Yeah,
I think he's going to catch him with timing. I think that Canelo is going to be surprised at how strong he is at this weight class. I think that this is going to be both guys' last fight, possibly. I think that they might do a rematch, and this is going to be the end of an era that we'll call like that, the guys that emerged from the COVID era.
What a terrible way to go out.
Really isn't. If this is the way you're going out, it's not terrible.
I don't have a problem with it, bro. And as much as I still would love to see Canelo fight Benavidez and some of the other young big guys, those guys have all essentially moved up in weight, and super middleweight is not as interesting as it was a year ago. And this type of fight, I think, is also just generally good for boxing to have two big notable names, that people that maybe don't know as much about boxing aren't analyzing the size difference in the same way that we are. It's something that they can really get excited about.
I'll give you an example. I've been dating my girlfriend for how long? The two fighters, she's drawn to three fighters: Usyk, Crawford, Canelo. After Crawford fought Charlo, she said, could he fight Terrence Crawford? Is that a fight? So for people that are casually observing it, it's a really fun fight because it's like two of the most interesting people facing off. And I think that that's really cool that these two fighters are risking it, because for Canelo, there's a huge risk of losing to a smaller man. And for Crawford, there's the risk of taking damage from a bigger man. So
sure,
I think that it's really cool that they're risking it. Sure, they're being rewarded, but I think that it's easy to say, oh, cool, they're getting paid. I mean, there's a lot of guys that can get paid and fights still don't get made. And I think that it's nice that a fight like this is being put together.
Sure. And again, that's why I liken this era for Canelo more to that post, like Brandon Rios on part of Pacquiao's career, where he still had it. He still had the goods, but there was like a little edge that got taken off of him where he wasn't as much of a destroyer. And I still view Canelo that way. And if he can maintain those skills against a smaller guy, that's why I lean towards him. But
I don't see that guy anymore.
I think I saw it in the Munguia fight, at least on a technical level. I think that there were who did he fight after Munguia?
He fought Berlanga.
Yeah, I think we saw it. I think we saw it against Berlanga. We didn't see it against Skull, but Skull really showed little interest in engaging.
I mean, there's people that think Skull won the fight.
Do you? I didn't see it.
I mean, it was a terrible fight, bro. Like, that's a great way to waste your day if you're going to even battle that argument. It's just, it wasn't a good fight. TJ in the chat, it's been a while, fella. Canelo too big. How does Bud win? He barely gets past Madrimayoff at 154. We'll probably break it down closer to the fight. Well, what do you think, Dakota?
I think I'll just give one point that part of why you might think Canelo has a better chance is because Madrimov is kind of built like Canelo. He's a bigger guy than Terrence. He's thicker. And there were things about that fight where Terrence looked uncomfortable. And I think that if you were leaning towards Canelo, you could look to that fight. Now, the flip side of that is that I think that Madrimov is a little bit faster. He's a little bit fresher. And I think he knew that that was his moment. And if, some of what Lukey's saying comes to fruition where he doesn't have that same drive, Madrimov had that drive.
I think also the foot speed. with Madrimov.
Totally.
He had foot speed, and I don't think Canelo's ever had foot speed, really, to be honest. And I think that's
what
the
he's
big
had is
thing.
good foot placement. He's
His
had good
foot
ring
placement,
positioning.
and he could get the speed up, and he could step, and he could cut corners on steps. So I felt like Crawford thought he was 2 steps away, and he was a step and a half away. He was good with his feet. And I think that the issue in this fight, and this sounds like cliche, but it's going to come down to the feet. And I just feel like Canelo's kind of slow at this point, and Crawford is a fighter who's going to be very willing to make Canelo have to use a lot of energy in this type of fight. And I think that that's a fight that benefits Crawford.
It very well could.
Let's get into this week's fights, bro.
Shout out
you were at the Top Rank show. So why don't we start with your observations at the Top Rank show?
Shit, man. I mean, I guess we could just start from the top of the key. It's like with Vito Mielnicki, man, I just feel like what we're seeing is a guy who takes baby steps, but he does take them. And in this fight, I felt like we saw a better poise, a better pace, a more measured approach. And the guy was a little bit more passive, right? So it's different than when a guy's coming at you and what does that bring out of you. But I liked watching Vito stay within himself, stay sharp, not take unnecessary shots, and think his way through a fight, you know, with a guy that, again, was not very aggressive, but would throw a random counter shot or a pot shot just to keep him comfortable, or keep him uncomfortable, keep him on his toes. You know, I like what I'm seeing from Vito. It was a good win. You know, it felt like a no-brainer to me, at least, that at some point him and Jahi Tucker are going to fight. If they both have, you know, they're on the same card, they're in the same weight class, from the same part of the world, you know, makes sense to me.
So what I see with Vito is, and we've seen this a bit, are these kind of really talented amateur prospects who are extremely good at boxing. To me, Vito has a ton of technical skill. He has a ton of ability, but he's having trouble transitioning a great amateur style to a great professional style. And that's kind of the issue that I'm seeing, is he doesn't really know where to how to get to that elite amateur level of success that he had. And he turned pro so young that now his record is really developed, right? So he has this really developed record. He turned pro really young. He was one of the best amateurs in his era, but he's caught in between styles where it's probably his most effective style is, you know, distance and range, but he never had those elite fights as an amateur at 18 or 19 years old against grown men to kind of work on that style that might get you ready for the pros. So, I mean, it's kind of tough, because I could see him as a world champion, or I could see him stuck at this level, or I could see him getting upset. The hardest part about Vito is I don't really know where he is. I see a ton of talent, but then I see a lot of caution, because he's really young with a lot of potential, but he's not quite showing that development with a professional style just yet.
But where I'm optimistic about Vito, bro, if you compared every fighter that's 22, 23 years old, he's ahead of the curve.
And I like that.
So that I think that's where I get optimistic about him, where it's like, of course, there's still room to work and room to grow. Not everybody's going to be Moses Atauma or Brian Norman. You know what I mean? If you compared Vito Mielnicki and his progress at, I think he's 22 years old, to the average 22-year-old fighter, he's way ahead of the curve, and he
came back
does
from
keep
a loss.
getting better. He does keep getting better. You know, the bottom line is Conor Coyle was a pretty good fighter, bro. Like, that was no slouch, and they had a close fight, and you live and you learn when you're a young fighter like that. You know what I mean? Conor knew that was his one shot. He came in, he fought hard. You know, I think that there may be like a ceiling for Vito at some point. We haven't really hit that. We haven't, you know, been in the deep end with him like that yet. But when I look at, if I was looking at a 22-year-old guy that had 10 fights and they fought that performance, I'd go, fucking hey, dude, this guy's pretty mature for his age.
He's got, like, if you're a boxing guy, you can see the talent. Like, he has a lot of things that if you saw it, you go, man, this guy has a lot of really good skill sets, right? The problem is the pros, often people are drawn to power. He's not always going to be a knockout guy based on temperament, based on looking at the distance. He's kind of risk adverse at times, but not horrible. But I saw a mature performance. The thing I most like about him is he reinvented his career after an early loss. So he's lost in his career. He's gone back to the gym and developed into an even better fighter. And I think in the modern era, that speaks to something. It's just a strange era where we have fighters like him and Xander Zayas who might be halfway through their career or a third of the way through their career, and they're 22, 23. And it's just a weird way of looking at it, because I just don't think what we're learning is when fighters turn pro that young, there's a level of physical development that's hard on the body, to go. And we haven't really seen just yet that fighter that's had the Hall of Fame career turning pro that young in the modern era. We haven't seen that fighter yet.
Well, I think that funny enough that the two guys we were just talking about is Manny Pacquiao and Canelo, who both went pro at 15 years old. But those are, in essence, freaks of nature, people that are once in a generation type of talents, and also people coming from third world countries where, there was just that was a little bit more normalized, particularly in the Philippines.
Let me put a cherry on that. Let me add to that thought. We haven't seen a 16-year-old, 17, 18-year-old boxer as of that I can think of who signed with a major promoter, had to deal with the hoopla of being signed by a major promoter and being on undercards as an attraction that people should be watching. Because I think that's part of the hurdle is early Canelo, early Pacquiao might have turned pro young, but they were kind of, on these cards. They were just some guy that was young and they were starting to stand out. Part of, I think, what's hard is these young kids turn pro. Everyone's like, dude, this guy's super young, but he's super talented. And there's that, right? And then maybe you lose, or maybe you're developing as a fighter, and now everybody's calling you out because you're a young kid and there's 32-year-olds. So we haven't seen this formula just yet work. And maybe it's Vito, maybe it's Xander. Someone inevitably is going to be it, but I think that it's an understated saga of these type of fighters that turn pro at 16, that they have to deal with a whole lot of like growing up, life, pro boxing, and all that stuff in front of a lot of people.
Or the answer is ultimately that it inherently doesn't really work or doesn't maximize the fighter's talent. And we don't have the trends. Maybe Mike Tyson would be another example. He was somebody who went pro at 18, 19 and had, a quicker success than your average guy. But he also, I would say, had a pretty fast burnout, and ultimately, I think, underperformed with the talent. That not that he wasn't a great fighter, but even as a great fighter, when he stepped up and fought other great fighters, he generally lost because he just there was a part of his growth that was stunted.
Something to watch. The thing that I love the most was our guy Jahi Tucker. Him and Lorenzo Simpson had probably the best fight of the month so far. Just a banger of a fight. Love both their mentalities going into this one. Watching that live, did that feel like Jahi really made a case for prospect of the year, given his 2 victories this year and given kind of this stage, fighting a guy who many believed in Truck Simpson, he would be a superstar level boxer when he turned pro?
Well, first of all, big ups to Truck Simpson, because I think that he's a guy that can also grow and learn from a fight like this. He's another young guy just taking tough fights, and I don't think that's the last we see of him after a performance like that. And honestly, I'd love to see him run it back. But in terms of Jahi, man, it just feels like Jahi is starting to really blossom. He's starting to really come into his own and develop a unique style that's difficult to replicate and also kind of difficult to describe, because he can do a little of this, little of that, but he's also a little wild at times. He's just a good hang, bro. He's just a good hang. He makes it real simple for us as fans because he wants to take tough fights and he wants to be in good fights and he wants to get better. And, I don't know. To me, Jahi Tucker makes it easy.
Kind of reminds me of, and it's not a complete comparison, right? The outside the life stuff isn't, but he reminds me of kind of like a Johnny Tapia type fighter. Just like a little, like, you don't know what you're getting.
It's real loose.
Nothing is like an act with Jahi. Like, it's like the funniest was the press conference where he has the heavyweight Canobia or whatever. He tells him to hold his cell phone because he's streaming it. And then he's talking to the phone and this heavyweight's holding it. And it's like completely like You'd see no other fighter doing it. And then his impassioned speech of that's so quiet, which I don't even know what it means, but it's like he just kind of has that, like, nothing is rehearsed. It's just genuine. And you can feel that he just genuinely feels that he's a tough man who wants to fight other tough people. And it's not cringy. It's just like, there's an intensity to some of the, I don't want to call him a great fighter because he hasn't earned it, but he's feeling like my prospect of the year. Next week, we're giving out awards for mid-year awards, and I'm going to kind of spoil my hand. I think he's the prospect of the year halfway through 2025.
I think that would be very fair, but I also think that he's starting to, sometimes when you take losses early in your careers, you go from a guy that people have questions about to a contender. You sort of skip that prospect phase because you don't have the O anymore, and people take that label off of you. So I think some of that has happened. And now beating Chuck Simpson, beating Troy Williamson, winning, beating like guys that would otherwise outside of Jahi be like considered fringe contenders. I think he's kind of worked his way into that category.
What were your boots on the ground at this fight? Any other things you want to observe? Anything that happened at the presser, the weigh-in, fight night? Any interesting walkout songs? Anything that people should know?
Anything that people should know? Well, I think one thing that's interesting to know is watching Damian Kaneba from ringside is a different experience because you can hear how hard he hits. He's not obviously the biggest puncher, but when you're watching him on TV, it's a little like there's something not quite satisfying about him as a heavyweight. And I think some of it's that he's gotten better, but in seeing him live and watching him, seeing how fast he is for a guy that size and hearing the shots, the way they were landing, the body shots, I think that he's a guy who is also developing and could be a problem for some people. And it's interesting, he went pro around the same time as Richard Torres and Jared Anderson and some other heavyweights who were younger and had way more attention behind them. But in recent fights, obviously, we've seen Jared lose, look a little questionable. We've seen Richard have a really tough fight with Guido Vianello and look a little shaky in that fight. And it's funny how, to me at least, Kaneba of the three has the most upside right now.
Yeah, I'm still a big believer in Richard Torres. I think that his boxing ability is underrated, but I get what you're saying. He's got a great coach. Sean George is one of these guys that, he's not screaming out for attention, but Sean George is a really, really good coach, really, really good boxing mind. And when you have a heavyweight working with Sean George, typically they're going to be getting better fight after fight. That's one of those guys. There's guys throughout the country, one of them, Mark DeLuca. There's John Pullman. There's not, Mike Basil. You got Robert Garcia. You can go down the list. Aaron Navarro, Bobby Benton, these really good coaches. And it's like, you might not see the growth overnight, but fight by fight, they're just getting slightly better because they're going to camp and they're not just having them work out. It's like there's a method to the madness and the guys are incrementally getting better. So seeing him live made him an interesting figure to you.
Absolutely. I was interested in him before just because when you see a guy that's that big that can move well, it's like, well, there's potential there inherently. But seeing him be a little more hurtful, a little bit more powerful in person, maybe a slightly different intention, I was really impressed. The other, I guess, standout worth mentioning is Lissandra Contreras, who, it was just a pro debut, a little 4-rounder, but there was like some young Rigondeaux moments in there, man. I mean, she was slipping and sliding around. She had good punching power. Like, I haven't seen somebody make a pro debut like that I was like I was really, it was a fun surprise. I didn't know what to expect from that matchup. And she at least for me, was a highlight of the night.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go check her out. I'm going to follow her career, but maybe that's someone you can collab with and do a project with.
Right, I would love to. If she's watching, holler at me, Lissandra. I was impressed.
I think you might have to reach out, but and then in the comments before we keep going, I want Bud to fight at 170 with the winner. It better be if Usyk can, with 40-pound weight difference, Bud also can. I mean, that's kind of the underlying thing that no one talks about with Usyk is like the guy basically jumped up 40 pounds in weight. but when you do it in heavyweight, like no one cares. Like you fight a 280-pound guy,
Yeah.
and you're 230, and everyone's like, "Oh, they're just heavyweight," but it's really like
always
Usyk.
been an odd distinction in boxing to me. And sometimes I can make sense of it and sometimes I can't. But like, why do we make that distinction between 147 and 154, but we don't between 247 and 254?
And to me is why Usyk's the number one guy in the world right now. Is he made the jump and made it look relatively easy. Not super easy, but he made it look easy.
And just fighting an open class of guys that are not his size, whereas other champions get to fight guys their size.
Yeah. Thoughts on Edgar Berlanga, Khamzat Shiraz, lads? I mean, I will get into this in a couple of weeks, but my general thought is I think Berlanga just hits too hard. I think that like Shiraz is talented. We were very high on him, but I've seen that he gets hit a bit. He's having trouble making that leap. And I think when you go in with a guy like Berlanga, if you get hit clean, it's just a game changer. That's just my initial thought. I think Berlanga hits too hard and he's going to stop him.
I love that, bro, because I'm totally leading Hamza on that one. I think a guy that's 6'3", 6'4", like that, making middleweight, you can't be bringing your best self. He's moving up in weight, and the long, fast, explosive fighter that we've seen at his very best. I just don't think that Edgar can close the gap or be athletic enough to hang with him. And personally, I think Hamza is going to win that fight.
Great, a little conflict. People love conflict on these shows. So
hey, listen, we don't always see it the exact same way. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's not rehearsed. I think that covers the top ranked card. Now let's go to WBO welterweight champion Brian Norman got a spectacular knockout over Jin Sasaki this weekend. Highlight reel, actually very scary. Brian's probably the best welterweight in the world because that same day, Boots Ennis announced that he's moving to 154 pounds. Just how good is Brian Norman? Because I'm starting to think we might have a real guy alert. Like, albeit I heard a lot of people saying this could be a fight of the year. I never saw this fight as a fight of the year, bro. I saw this as how much punishment can Jin Sasaki take, because Norman's a slugger and he was coming in with a lot more ammunition than Jin. And Jin to me is kind of like one of those Kama guy, Vanderlei Silva. They're going to eat some shots. It's just a bad style to come forward against a real big puncher. But Norman did some things in this fight that made me think he's going to be a problem for some guys.
Oh, he's a problem. He's a problem. And this was, I would say, like the punctuation or the exclamation point on, like, when I first saw him fight Quentin Randall, bro, I had no idea that there was a guy this technical or this measured or this intelligent, in that fighter. I just didn't see it. And some of that was Quentin, but I think some of it was him developing and not entirely knowing who he was yet. But man, he was assertive.
23 now?
He's fucking 23, 24. And it's like, he's assertive. He's sharp. He doesn't waste anything. You never see him breathing hard or trying hard. He's just right in the pocket the whole fucking fight. And at least as far as welterweight is concerned, I don't think anybody's touching him right now. But I also think that Sasaki is a flawed fighter. He's
a fight of the year type guy. He's a Kama guy, right?
Yeah. And he's got some ability, right? Also, by the way, a really young guy, 23 years old, Sasaki, which I didn't know that going in, that this was like two prospect age guys that are at the top of the division. I think Sasaki has some upside as well if he can recover from that fight, but it's like
hard to come back from this type of knockout, bro, because this knockout, like, this was a send-off. This is a Aaron Judge ninth bottom of the ninth walk off. Everyone's going home happy if they're the fans, but if you're not, you're looking at that picture like, what happened? I mean, this is early candidate knockout of the year, right?
I mean, there's not even really like a number two right now.
Yeah, there's not even like a number two that we can think of. I mean, this is like probably the image you will see for Brian Norman's career that he was a world champion, is him knocking out Jin Sasaki.
Yeah, and I unfortunately, right, there isn't a division. Like, the division he's at is a little like middleweight, right? It's a former glory division that's like open for rent, right? Like there's no one occupying it. There's no one that's taking ownership of it. And I think that he has the opportunity to do that. I don't know who the big fights are for him. I don't know if he'll be able to get a Mario Barrios fight, but maybe we can get him in with Uncle Abel before it's all said and done.
I mean, Uncle Abel is way better than people think. Like my guy, Uncle Abel, is out here giving guys 15.
That's what I'm saying. I would love to see that fight. I would love to see that fight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd like to see him with Devin Haney. I'd like to see him with Teofimo Lopez. I'd like to see him with any of these guys, Jermaine Ortiz, any of these guys.
Who's the guy that just beat Kavaliauskas? I can never remember his name. You know who I'm talking about?
Suleiman Sissoko.
I think that would be a good fight for him.
Yeah, I just want to see him in consequential bouts. That's the thing, is like I want to see him in bouts that mean something, because I think we might have a big time player in the division, and that while people were laughing at the Boots fight, he's not ready. I mean, realistically, he could be a 2-division world champion and be just as accomplished as Boots. And I'm as big of a Boots fan as anyone. I'm on Boots Island. I have stock on Boots. I'm a huge Boots fan. But I mean, Boots is also frustrating to the extent of 4 years ago when we started doing these shows together, or 3 years ago, I'm like, dude, this guy's the future. And now we're at a point where the future should be present. And that Stanionis performance was awesome. It's his best performance of his career. Showed
hell of a fight too.
But it's like it's not even just the inactivity in the ring. It's like he disappears from the spotlight.
Which I hate, but the flip side of that coin, right, is that I don't think Norman's fought anybody on Stanionis' level. And I think that Boots has had a couple of those step-up fights now. Sometimes he's passed with flying colors. Sometimes he hasn't, right? Like the second Chukajin fight was a real dud. He lost 4 or 5 rounds of a fight in a rematch against a guy he swept. So there's been those moments, but we haven't seen Norman at that level yet.
Want to get some comments? Our guy Bipolar Boxing, shout out to you guys. I'll appreciate the positivity of the channel. That's hard to find in the boxing world these days. Bipolar Boxing, thank you for that. I was at the Norman Janelsa Boca Chica fight where he got knocked down in the first round. Did not see this coming from. I think it also shows fighters develop. And then our guy Combat Sports Media, that's my guy Sev. Boots is not in the business of fighting anyone. And I think that speaks to when you don't consistently give the fans matchups that they're interested in, some are going to turn on you. And I think that's what's happened is Boots is one of the most talented fighters, but because, this is a fickle sport where the fans want the best matchups, or they want to see matchups that they're interested in, Boots is starting to go from one of the most amazing up-and-comers to people being a little frustrated in why.
But I got to be honest too, bro. I feel like sometimes people have short-term memory. Like Stanionis has been kind of like the consensus number 2 guy for a little bit.
Stanionis awesome.
So that was the fight to take at the time. So Boots may not be in exciting matchups because he couldn't get Spence, or he couldn't get Crawford, or he couldn't get the old guard to get in with him. But I feel like taking the Stanionis fight, that is the type of fight we want him to be in. We just want
should be out there at 54.
We just don't want to have to wait 16 months for him to do it.
I think the frustration is you see him once a year, and it's been far too many times at this point in his career where you saw him once and then he just wasn't back. And that kind of hurts. The Gennady Golovkin rule was he was fighting 4 times a year, and it really helped people get familiar with how exciting he was. So for me personally, I don't always need to see a great fight. I want to see activity if you can't deliver on it. Combat Sports said he avoided Ortiz, rejected Teofimo. Stanionis was never a threat. I mean, Stanionis is a bad boy, man.
He was definitely a threat. He was definitely a threat.
Okay, on to the next one we're going to go to is, got to timestamp it so the people listening know. Francisco Rodriguez, maybe one of the most underrated fighters of the modern era, had a tough fight with basically all the lower weight legends, including Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. When people want to make fun of Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez's career, that is a good fight to reference because that was kind of prime Chocolatito when he won that. He came and just beat up Galal Yafai, who now is basically at a career crossroads after an exciting amateur career and one of the more standout Olympic amateurs from the Great Britain team of 2020. to me, what this fight was quite clearly was when someone has an effective 3-round pressure style, amateur boxing style, but can't translate that pressure, volume, attack someone, look for a stoppage style into a sustained 10 or 12 round fight. That is what I saw in this fight was Yafai is having trouble taking his successful amateur approach and bringing it to a professional boxing. And he fought a very good veteran who exploited a lot of his weaknesses.
Well, I didn't see it, obviously, because I was on coverage last night, but that does surprise me, especially considering Yafai's last performance against Sonny Edwards. I don't really know that much about Rodriguez. I can't remember seeing him before, but that definitely comes as a surprise to me.
I mean, I'm kind of a Francisco Rodriguez head. Would you like me, for the listeners and you, would you like me to play the hits on his career?
Sure.
Okay, I'd love to, right? I'd love to. And there's like a million Francisco Rodriguez's on BoxRec. So this is super good. By the way, love BoxRec. There's like on Twitter, there's all this debate about where do you go to get your info. I love BoxRec. I'm a BoxRec guy. They called me Mr. BoxRec. So I'm a BoxRec guy. So we had this. He loses in 2022. He lost to Junto Nakatani. Okay, no shame in that. 2021 loses to Kazuto Ioka in a title fight. Okay. And he beaten, let's see, what else do we have here? A lot of his, but like in the Ioka fight, right? 116, 112 is how he loses, right? One of the scorecards against Nakatani, 97-92. So he goes down, but he's giving it a fight. Okay. Moises Fuentes lost a split decision in 2015. Donnie Nietes, when he was there, fought him tough. He beat, what's his name? Takayama, didn't they call him? You probably don't remember, but I think they called him like something like lightning hands or lightning foot. He was like a real fast Japanese fighter in that era. Beat him. Roman Gonzalez stopped him, but that was a really competitive fight. So his career goes back to basically at a high level 2013 September when he fought Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. So this is a guy at the lower weights who has a career of fighting the best. And to me, Galal Yafai, the issue I'm seeing is he really needs to close distance and be physical. We're not seeing a nuanced approach to his professional. And I think part of it is that you move these accelerated, maybe a little bit older, deep amateur fighters, you move them different, hoping that they're there. But not every fighter with a great amateur pedigree is ready to have a great pro career. And I think Yahai kind of got rushed into this spot for whatever reason. I don't know the situation. And now he's having to adjust, and he's taking on guys who see some flaws in his style. Francisco Rodriguez, really a tremendous performance. A lot of people on the internet were making fun of Matchroom because they've had a lot of Mexican fighters go over there. I think it's the opposite, and I'll shut my yapper on this. I think Eddie's got balls to make real fights at times, and he puts his guys in tough because he either believes in them or he's making a fight. So I don't think that's something we need to make fun of because I think Eddie's actually making fights and is willing to throw his guys in tough. You're muted, bub.
That's part of what we want as fans.
Yeah, but some of the dialogue, see, boxing's weird now. People say they're fans, but they're acting like managers where they're doing strategy and all this. And we're not just sitting back and is this a good fight? Is this a talented fighter? People are overcomplicating the system.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
So, okay, that's all we'll touch on that card. And then obviously I have to do another Lukey solo. So this is going to be super fun for you. You're going, hell yeah. Callum Walsh won, and he is with 360 Promotions. He got a nasty cut though in the fight. I'm not sure if he could return with Zuffa Boxing, or at least I believe it is Zuffa Boxing that is putting on the Canelo-Crawford fight. And given that he's with 360 Promotions and Tom Loeffler has a close relationship with Dana White, I think some people were wondering if he would end up on an undercard. I don't think that's possible, with this cut he sustained. Callum Walsh is a guy where I didn't see him as much of a prospect last year. This year, he fought a guy that's as good as the fighter he fought at Madison Square Garden and had a tough fight, and he was dominating. He just got a head clash. Really took a step up. The only Kane Sandoval, our guy. Maybe I'll get Kane on the show next week. We'll see. Maybe we'll see if we want to get Kane on for our mid-year awards. He had a good performance. Got a guy out of there pretty quick, but upset on the undercard. Gor Yeritsyan got knocked out on the YouTube prelims by Vernon Brown. So second loss for Gor Yeritsyan, who to me never really seems like he's been the same fighter since suffering that split decision loss last summer in July. After that loss, he's just looked like a completely different fighter to me.
Unfortunately, like I said, I didn't see any of it. That's also
that's basically, if you wanted your 360 promotions wrap up, that's kind of it. If you have any more questions on that, leave it in the comment and we will get going on it. Now to this week, we will just touch over this really quick. Liam Paro returns and he's facing Jonathan Navarro. It happens sometime in the middle of this coming week and it's in Australia. What are your thoughts?
I don't know that I know the opponent, but I'm glad to see Liam Paro coming back because I think that it's becoming very obvious that Richardson Hitchens is a super special fighter, and I just hope that that's not a performance that hangs over his head for his entire career, and that people don't want to see him, because I also think Liam Paro is a pretty special fighter in his own right. Again, I don't really know I'm looking at him now. I can't say that I've ever seen this guy fight.
He was an old Golden Boy Promotions fighter. He's part of the Navarro family. I believe his uncle is Stephen Navarro's dad. There's David Navarro. There's a bunch of Navarros in Southern California. Comes from the fighting family. Had an injury, trying to come back. I want to say it's like a bicep injury or something. It put him out for a long period of time. And then he lost to kind of like a developmental fighter in his last fight in Ireland, and now he's getting an opportunity against Paro, coming off a loss that was kind of like a stay busy fight. A lot of people looked at it as a stay busy type fight in his last fight.
Is this a stay busy fight for Paro?
I think that given that, and Jonathan's my guy, but given the trouble he had in his last fight, one would look at this and say that this might be Paro coming back, and this is a higher level, maybe stay busy or return to the ring fight. But given Navarro had trouble with, in my opinion, a less talented fighter, this is a big ask of Navarro. But once again, Navarro is one of these guys that had like 15 national titles as an amateur. So he has a lot of experience. I think it's more so physical, and can his body do what he wants it to do in the ring?
Well, I should be a good one, man. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing my guy Liam Paro back in the ring. I want to reiterate a point that I know I've made multiple times because I'm looking down the undercard on here. If there's a Liam or a Callum out there that gets a really cool fucking nickname, you are going to stand out from the crowd, because I'm having a hard time keeping track of all my Liams and all my Callums. But if some guy was, the Brown Bomber.
What about the Boogeyman? I was just watching Jesse Ferguson this weekend. He came out to the Halloween theme.
If a Liam or a fucking Callum can get a cool nickname going, you're gonna separate.
Might make that jump. That's what you're saying. They might make that jump. So then, speaking of a nickname, the Bronze Bomber is back this weekend. Bomb Squad is taking on. Let me see what this guy's name is. He's taking on Tyrrell Herndon, who previously fought Richard Torres and was stopped by him. It's a pay-per-view main event. It's on ppv.com. It's on Friday night. What is your anything on this? Level of interest, thoughts, everything?
I'm Hannibal Buress sitting on the couch and he just goes whack. That's me, bro. It's all good if you want to watch it, but this is not one for me. I've never been a massive Deontay Wilder fan, particularly in light of 3 or 4 straight losses now. I just, they're sort of cashing out on fans who turned him into something that he wasn't, and think, well, if he lets his hands go, he can knock anybody out. And it's just like, but he's not gonna anymore. And so Dakota, I'm
Is
not
there
interested.
a chance that like he loses this? Like because
Sure.
there is a level of Wilder where, and it's keep in mind he's fighting high level guys. So more than likely, the most obvious outcome of this will be he gets in there and there's just a big skill gap. There's like a talent gap. He comes in, he hits that jab, lands a right hand, knockout, and then he's able to transition to a big fight. But I'm asking you percentage or your thoughts. Is there a chance that this turns into a split decision, a 50-50 fight? He gets rocked. Is there any sort of drama that you could see in this matchup?
I think absolutely. And it's not just because of losing, it's because of the amount of punishment that he's taken in these losses in 3 fights with Tyson Fury, in getting knocked out by Zhilei Zhang in really brutal fashion. Also over a year ago. There's nothing in this that looks good for Wilder. And so I don't know that it would take like a special fighter to expose that at this point in his career.
Yeah. No, I hear you, bro. Undercard is pretty, like, you're basically paying your money for this
By the way,
card.
I just got to shout out Bipolar for saying that Shia LaBeouf would play me in the movie. I appreciate that, bro. That's pretty
Okay,
good.
go to the comments. So before we break down this undercard, which doesn't really exist on this card,
Dakota and Lukey. Who's playing Lukey, bro?
Kevin Costner. The ages don't match up, but it's probably Kevin Costner. The ages don't match up, but
Wow.
his female would work. Don't you think Kevin Costner would be a good one for me?
Sure, bud.
Yeah, I mean
make that
or,
happen.
I mean, it doesn't really work either, but Owen Wilson, I could see Owen Wilson playing me.
Owen Wilson could do a great Lukey impression, I think.
Yeah, I think he could, you know. So I think Owen Wilson for the dialogue, but Kevin Costner for the mannerisms. Those are mine. Throw it in the chat if you want. With Mr. Pullman, we were talking about maybe doing a podcast. That was one thing I wanted to ask a bunch of boxers is who would play you in a movie, and would it be a rom-com? What would it be?
Yeah.
Would it be a horror film, survival? Talk us through the motif of the movie. Where would it be set? By the way, I was searching for your guys' Tucker versus Simpson breakdown. I would choose Shia LaBeouf to play Dakota. I agree. Matchroom put Ray Ford in tough early, and that did a lot of good for him throughout his career.
Great example of that, by the way. Great example.
Walsh called out Fernando Vargas Jr. for the Crawford Canelo undercard. That's a fine fight. That's like a good, big, famous person fight.
Yeah, because what is the trajectory for Callum Walsh? Right? I'm trying
for
to
Callum Walsh, the trajectory is a title. At some point, get a title and have a lot of Irish people come to fights and see if you can be a Hall of Fame boxer. But I think the hope is that he can get a belt, sell a lot of tickets, and you know, there's a level of talent with Callum Walsh where if the moments line up, he could be a Hall of Fame boxer. The question is, how does he handle the moments, and how does he do things? How does he handle stardom? How good is he? Like, there's just a lot of unknowns with him, and he's a confusing boxer for me to watch because at times I think he's amazing, and at times I just don't think he's even a world level prospect.
He's also out on an island on his own with 360, and I love what they do. I've covered their fights.
They're amazing, but it's on UFC.
They're not easy to watch. They're not easy to watch, and he's always a main event guy, whereas on a bigger promoter, he's a mid-card guy.
Yeah, but I think that also 360 is doing it the right way, where they're building up guys through their promotion, and I'm
not hating on him, bro. I'm just saying he's out on an island.
But I think the belief is they're going to step up as a promotion these next couple of years, and he's going to help them make that leap. To me, Callum Walsh, I almost got confused which Callum I was talking about. It happened. He's like a million.
A good nickname for that kid would go a long way.
Yeah, he's King Callum, but
King Callum, yeah, Prince Callum, bro.
Yeah, it doesn't quite work for me. He reminds me of Emiliano Vargas. Emiliano Vargas is the exact same. Sometimes I see him, I'm like, this guy's going to be a title holder. Sometimes I see him and I go, I just don't see it. I think they're in the same spot.
Yeah, I would think that Callum's a little farther along.
Well, in terms of where they're ranked, I'm just saying eye test. When I look at the eye test on him, there's times where I'm like, this guy's amazing. There's times, Emiliano Vargas to me is like 3-4 years away from a title. He's taking a slower path, in my opinion.
Sure.
And that's just how I see it. Okay, so this undercard is we got Damon Nicholson, and Nico Hernandez, and a lot of regional guys. So if you're buying the pay-per-view, you're probably know an undercard fighter, or you're tuning in to see Deontay Wilder. I have no clue what to expect from this fight, to be perfectly honest. Like, I have no idea what. I'm more than likely going to be watching it because I'm a sicko, and my girlfriend's going to be very, very mad at me. She's not going to be happy.
I don't think I'll catch that one, Lukey. So you'll be solo on that next week.
I'm going to be solo on that one. Maybe I'll do a live stream after the Unhinged.
Really
the
paying for that?
Yeah,
you really paying for 4 out of 5 losses, Deontay Wilder?
Yeah, I think I might be able to do fight coverage on that one. The Unhinged all by myself live stream.
I mean, Damon Nicholson's a good fighter, but
there's a lot of good fighters on the card. I don't want to diminish their achievements. The thing is, it's a pay-per-view, albeit a lower budget pay-per-view that's built around Deontay Wilder and basically a developmental fight, a comeback fight, and regional ticket sellers. So it's just kind of a tough ask of the consumer.
Whack.
Probably one of my favorite fights this week is our guy Christian Mbilli. Starting to really like Christian Mbilli. He's taken on Sulecki. Speaking of 360 promotions, he just beat Ali Akhmedov. How much of a real fight is this fight?
That's a real fight, Bob. That's a real fight, no lie. I mean, Sulecki's been a guy he's kind of like Rodriguez, right? He's been a guy that's been in with the best. He's been right there a couple of times. The only guy to really put it on him is Pacheco. And I think Diego's a special fighter, but he's given some of the best their toughest fight, or one of their toughest fights. And I think that this might be his best opponent to date, honestly. And I know a lot of people are not going to know Sulecki in the same way, but go back and watch some of his old fights. Go back and watch his fight with Danny Jacobs, and I think you'll see a guy that is a problem for him.
Tough in that Danny Jacobs fight, bro. Like, he came throwing punches. Obviously, he's not the same guy, I think, anymore. But he just dropped.
Just fight with Gabe Rosado. He shows skill. He shows balls in that fight. He's had some really good nights.
Well, I think also what I want to add to this is he just beat Ali Akhmedov in Kazakhstan. So he went there, dropped him, and beat him, and got this opportunity. I wouldn't say that I view Mbilli as one of like the top guys, but he might be if like Canelo leaves the division. I think he's a physical fighter who I'm learning about how technical he is. That's how I think of him. I think he's becoming the man. He's battle tested. Eye of the Tiger management has done a great job at building their guys up through those Thursday night series. I really enjoy those cards. He fought the Atlantes Foxes. He took those tests to be battle ready. He's moved up in terms of development, but there is a level of, can he be outboxed? Is Mbilli just like an aggressive, overwhelm you, throwing a lot of punches, tornado fighter? Can he fight a tactical fight is my question. And I think some of those answers will come in this fight.
I definitely think they will. And Sulecki is a little bit more technical, but he's not necessarily like an up on the balls of his feet, move around on the outside type of guy. And so I think that there is potential that Mbilli is not going to have a hard time finding him and will just be more physical. But it is a guy who's had success at a certain level in a way that, even I would say like Derevyanchenko hasn't entirely.
I think Sulecki, the thing that's nice about this style mesh is I don't think anybody can outbox Mbilli staying on the back foot. And someone might go, what do you mean, Lukey? Because you're going to gas yourself out. You're going to have to take too many steps. There's no amount of cardiovascular conditioning you can do to move around that much. You have to set your feet and tactically move. You have to jab, set up, distance, punch, keep range, throw shots, move, get off, move. You can't excessively move against a guy like this because his whole style is dictated by volume. He fights at a pace that he's set in Mbilli. I think it's a really great matchup, and it's one that could steal the show on Friday night.
Yeah, I think it's a great fight too, bro. That's a real sleeper. Though I would
Where's Mbilli on like the You and Me One of Our Guy awards? Like, where is Mbilli? Because I feel like he's kind of like, yeah, he might be limited to a certain degree, but he's taken some good fights, and he's not really getting any like praise for this. He's just kind of he's taking hard fights, he's filling up an arena. But
it's almost like those flaws are used as the excuse not to fight him, right? But it's like, if he's so easy, then get in there and do it, kind of. You know what I mean?
Kind of reminds me of David Lemieux, and maybe you've said this in the past, where it's like he has a lot of power and a lot of explosion, and like people love saying why they can't fight him.
I also do think he will get outboxed at some point, but
it's inevitable. But I think that like him getting outboxed could also come in a fight of the year.
Yeah, sure. I think he's going to be a problem just on intensity and work rate and engine. He's going to be a problem for anybody. I also think he gets hit a decent amount, and someday that engine isn't going to be there, and there's not going to be a warning on that. But I think
you're not getting a lifetime warranty on his career, right? No. So like you're getting a 3-year. The window of his career is probably this 3 years, and that's it. So he's getting a 3-year window, and then like when it's over, it's probably really going to be over.
Yeah.
So undercard, if you're tuning into this card, the guys that I really like, my dude, Moreno Fendero. I love this dude. He's a big, strong, super middleweight. I think I don't want to say it, but I think he's got potentially like better beef potential. I don't want to gas him up too much, but I mean, this is a guy,
big praise,
a puncher, and I'm seeing systematic breakdowns of fighters who he's too more skilled than. But I'm seeing him systematically break down guys. He's sparring Iman Kitov. He's sparring all the top guys. I think he's a dude. He's on the card. Wyatt Sanford is also really, really noteworthy. I believe he's a 2024 Olympic bronze medalist from Canada. He is so good at fighting, poised and patient for an Olympic amateur style fighter. You would have thought he's a 3 or 4 year pro with the way he fights Dakota. He just sits behind it. In terms of like bigger name fighters that more people want to see, Arslanbek Makhmudov is going to be on the undercard. I think he has a lot of potential in terms of like the pressure, physicality. The promoters have said that he can box better than he can. I think he's kind of run into that ceiling of his talent. He's ran into guys, but those are the guys on the undercard that I kind of see I'm interested in.
Well, Steve Butler too. Always a good time.
Steve Butler, little bang. I think Mbilli's a higher level Steve Butler, but Steve Butler is kind of like the faults Steve Butler has, and Mbilli might have those problems at a higher level.
I don't think he's as durable. That's the other thing.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Okay, let's get to you've been itching and dying to break this one down. Chavez Jr. versus Jake Paul. What do you think, Dakota?
I have about as much interest in that fight as I do the Wilder fight. I don't fucking know, dude. I don't know. You got one guy who's 40 and like an alcoholic who had talent, and you got another guy who like doesn't have that much talent but's in the gym. I don't fucking know.
To me, I think that like Jake, like I was thinking about this the other day. When did he start boxing? Like 2019?
Sure.
2018, something
maybe
like that.
2018.
Yeah. To me, he's quite it's quite amazing, and I know this is going to drive you nuts, but I mean, he's taken on like a fringe level contender, albeit he's over the hill, but like he's basically like taken his professional fights in front of the world against guys that are somewhat dangerous yet smaller or older than him. For a guy that doesn't fully know what he's doing, it's pretty damn risky. And this is like a matchup where like Chavez Jr. can kind of play with house money. And these type of matchups, to me, typically, you look at Zab Judah, Danny Garcia. Zab had troubles mentally throughout his career. He fights Danny Garcia, and then all of a sudden he's able to.
Yeah, but those are two world champions, Bub.
Well, but Chavez Jr. is a world champion.
Yeah, but Jake Paul's not, and Chavez Jr. was a world champion at like featherweight in 2008. So it's not.
No,
really
middleweight.
I'm fucking around.
Yeah,
but you get what I'm saying.
What I'm saying is, I think Chavez is going to put up a better fight than people think. And I think that Jake is really developing. Like, you don't have to necessarily like the antics. You don't have to love what he does. But, like, the kid's got some balls, bro.
I just still don't think like he's much of a fighter. Like, when I watch him, there's nothing that, as a boxing guy, if that's the only thing you're in it for, it just doesn't grab me. And there's so many developing, we just spent an hour talking about Jahi Tucker and Vito Mielnicki and these guys that have real promise, to give something to the sport. And I still, to some extent, feel like as a fighter, this isn't what I'm in it for.
Well, I think what he is he's from the social media generation, which is absurd. You say absurd stuff and it gets you lots of attention.
But so are all those kids we just talked about, by the way.
No, but what I'm saying is this is someone that mastered the technology and is bringing that algorithm into boxing. So every fight he makes is like, the pitch of the fight is kind of interesting. Oh, he's fighting Mike Tyson. What's that going to look like? Oh, he's fighting Chavez Jr. I mean, Chavez has always kind of had issues. After that Fanfara fight, we've never seen the same guy, but this is a credentialed box. He always has a pitch where you kind of go, huh?
I think that's called a hustle, my boy.
You could call it a hustle or whatever, but there's always a level of like, what will it look like? And for better or worse, he's able to perform, except for the night he fought Tommy Fury. Like, he kind of puts himself into these big money fights without as much talent or experience, and he is forced to perform. And it's kind of
but Luki, I got to push back on that. He's got more talent and experience in terms of boxing than Nate Robinson or than Ben Askren. So this idea that he's a beginner that's getting in with all these fighters, it's like, no, he's fucking not.
But see, I'll push back on that.
You've been boxing for 6 years and you're fighting a guy with a hip replacement. You know what I mean?
He fought two guys there. After Ben Askren, I feel like people are like, dude, he's got to actually fight fighters. So like, he went from like novelty influencer fighter to you has to fight some level of a fighter. Even if they're old, we won't allow you to fight just any old guy. And we haven't seen one of these influencer fighters yet make that leap. Mostly influencers are fighting guys you and me have never heard of that have millions of subscribers. He's fighting people we've heard of that are over the hill. But I mean, for
in what sport though? Over the hill in what sport?
In boxing.
But they're all MMA guys outside of Tyson.
No. Let's look.
He hasn't made a career of fighting MMA guys.
Bro, I think because he's basically taking the same level of fights guys who are prospects take, but with interesting opponents. So his first fight, I have no clue who the guy is. Second fight, Nate Robinson. Third fight, Ben Askren. Fifth fight, Tyrone Woodley. Then he has Anderson Silva, Tommy Fury, Nate Diaz. Then he fought Andre August, my guy Ryan Borland. I mean, you do have a point that he's mostly fighting MMA guys. That is true.
I know.
Like,
you're too smart for this, Luke. You don't talk yourself into this hustle.
No, I mean, what I kind of enjoy is he's doing this thing where MMA was built on, we're like boxing, but we make the fights. I feel like now MMA has become less cool because like people's dads watch MMA and it's no longer fresh and new. And Jake Paul just basically did the gimmick UFC did, but being like, I'm a boxer, so I'm gonna beat MMA guys up. And he kind of didn't market to the boxing fans. He marketed to MMA fans wanting to see him lose, which is just kind of like the way a lot of these fights were made, where it's like, tune in to watch me fight Jake Paul, and you get like a rowdy, rambunctious MMA character / pro wrestler type figure. But I think there's a level. I'm genuinely interested in this fight because Tommy Fury is not as good of a boxer as Chavez, no matter what people say. And if Chavez is motivated, I think this could actually be a fight because there's questions around just how good Jake is.
Sure.
And I still think Jake's going to be a world champion because there's going to be some sanctioning body that has him fight for a vacant belt, and he's going to win a vacant belt.
I don't see it, but I've been wrong before.
In the chat, I'd favor Lester Martinez over Christian Mbilli in a future fight.
That's a Dakota type of fight.
That's a Dakota and Lukey fight. Somebody in the chat, they're making Zamo. No, but yeah. Are you boxers or trainers or something? Or are you just talking like fans? We're neither. We're just people on the internet. You can make your own decision on what we are.
We don't have to be that vague.
We don't have to identify or report, but if you enjoy the show, be sure to subscribe and leave a thumbs up if you do or you don't. And we appreciate you stopping by.
And by the way, we've both spent a pretty significant amount of time in the gym, so we're not couch guys either.
I mean, shoot, I'd say I spent 20 years in a boxing gym. How much have you spent, Dakota?
Probably 8 to 10.
Okay, so that's 30 to 35 years experience on here.
Yeah. So, I'm certainly not a competitor, but both Lukey and I have trained guys and been in that. We're sort of Swiss Army men in boxing.
Yeah. As Jahi Tucker said, you used to fight. I can tell by your knuckle. Paul said Chavez was not good enough for him a few months ago. Well, I mean, people say all types of stuff, right? Like you never know in boxing. There's a saying I heard now going back to the gyms, you never burn a bridge because boxing's weird and you never know who you're going to run into the next week. So it's just how it is. How will 360 promotions fighters fit into the new Zuffa promotions? We have no idea because we don't know what Zuffa is. The Dana White endeavor is the boxing thing. I believe they're calling it Zuffa boxing is going to be the Dana White boxing, whatever it is that we don't know. But once again, we haven't seen a press release. And with me, I like press releases. I like things that are that. Jake's going to be a champion. Ha, ha, ha. Let me test you. Who has the best footwork ever in boxing? Sick question. So there is none. That's the easy answer. It's going to be subjective. There are a lot of people that had great footwork throughout the sport. For me personally, if you want to know who I'm in recent memory watching, I would probably say Vasyl Lomachenko would be someone who comes to mind for some of the best footwork ever in boxing. Dakota, who would you ever to pass this test and earn a new subscriber?
Off the top of my head, my instinct says that it would be Bernard Hopkins. In terms of guys that I watched, his ability to change direction and put himself where he needed to be both be effective and make you uncomfortable. I think Lomachenko is a great pick for that as well. I think Usyk is a perfectly fair pick for something like that. There's a lot of guys with, Dimitri Bivol.
Look at our chat. Not
my guy. That was a good one.
That's why I love our chat, man.
That's some real insider.
That's some real insider stuff, man. Not Peter McGrail. Thank you for sharing that. Let's go through this undercard because this undercard is super deep dive. Dakota, Lukey, the listeners of our show want this undercard broken down more than probably the pay-per-view card. So let's get to it. Zurdo versus Dorticos. What are your thoughts on this fight? I think it could be a banger of a fight.
I mean, in theory, it's a good fight, but I haven't seen Dorticos since the cruiserweight tournament that they had back in 2019 or whenever exactly that tournament was. But I was always impressed with him. He fought some of the best in the division and never really got walked through. If he's who that guy was, I still think it's a good fight. But I also think that Zurdo's the best cruiserweight in the world right now, outside of Apataya. But we won't know that until they fight. But I definitely would favor Zurdo, and I don't think Dorticos has been particularly active.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's an interesting fight because if you're going to get ready for a fight like against Jay Apataya, I believe Dorticos is the hardest puncher you could face in the division outside of Apataya. So this is going to show us how well Zurdo takes a shot, because the thing about Zurdo is he will take a shot. I find this very interesting because I think Zurdo is a pound for pound level fighter, and people feel like because he lost to Bivol, they write him off. But sometimes you could just lose to a great fighter and you're still a great fighter. And the fact that he's had just a really great run at cruiserweight, he beat Chris Ballum-Smith, who then came back and beat Brandon Glanton. I mean, he's beating real guys at cruiserweight.
Yes, he is.
I would not even be shocked if Zurdo stops Dorticos, to be honest with you. I think that he's really trying to make a leap up. Our buddy in the comments said Mike Tyson has the best footwork. No one can match him. Okay, so that is an opinion.
I mean,
he does have good footwork.
Sure, but that's a little wild.
I mean, like they say, there's levels to this. Okay,
there's levels.
There's levels to this. So sure. Also on this undercard, there's two fights that really stand out to me, Dakota, and I want to break them. I want you to break them down with me. Avius Griffin versus Julian Rodriguez, hammer hands. That's a good 50-50 fight. But the one I like is Floyd Schofield versus Tevin Farmer. What are you seeing in those fights?
The first one, I'll admit, I don't know that I know either of those guys. But in terms of Schofield versus Farmer, on one hand, I love that matchup and I love this fight. On the other hand, I think that Tevin is sort of above being a gatekeeper, and I'm worried that that's what the game is trying to make him right now. But I think that he's perfectly capable of winning this fight. I think this is a true 50-50. There's a massive experience gap, that leans towards Farmer, and he's going to there's nothing that Schofield's going to show him that he hasn't seen before. And I think that he's going to show Schofield plenty of things he's never seen before. So it's a really interesting matchup, bro.
I believe that Tevin's probably going to win this fight. I think that my money, if I were to bet, because it's like Tevin fights on the inside as much as he boxes, and Schofield's had issues in the past with guys that move. He's just
much more hittable than he used to be, which is where I think that Schofield's youthful pressure and enthusiasm and all that, I think, could overwhelm Tevin. There was a time where it was like he was like a fly you couldn't swat.
He was like Pernell Whitaker at a point. He was mimicking Pernell. The thing I want to see early on is how are Tevin's legs looking and how does Tevin respond to punches? Because if Schofield's punches are making an impact, this could be a big win for Schofield. But I think Schofield also, on the other hand, has never fought someone that can fight on the outside and fight on the inside as fluidly as Tevin. And Tevin just fought Muratalla and Zepeda very, very close in 3 consecutive fights.
And honestly, I would rate both Zepeda and Muratalla quite a bit higher than Schofield at this point. So it's almost a step down. And not that he doesn't have a lot of upside and can get better, but right at this moment, it's sort of a step down in competition for Farmer.
What I see it is Floyd Schofield trying to elevate to the level of the Zepedas and so forth. And I guess what you're saying is Farmer's becoming like a gatekeeper to those guys looking to become main event fighters. But I think part of what makes Tevin so interesting is he doesn't view it that way. He looks at it as, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to beat this kid and I'm going to be back in the mix. If you had to lean one way or another, who would you lean?
I would lean Schofield, but it's a genuine 50-50.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a good fight. And then the Avius Griffin, Julian Rodriguez was with, let me just make sure I'm thinking of the right fight, because if it's not if it's not Julian Hammerhands, then I might be off on this one. But Avius Griffin has been just like a hidden gem, kind of underground word of mouth guy who got arrested early in his career and kind of had to battle back. Yeah, Hammerhands, Julian Rodriguez was with Top Rank in 2021. He lost to Jose Pedraza. There's a lot of developmental shows with Top Rank.
I remember him.
Avius Griffin is kind of a touted, just signed with MVP, I believe. Good young fighter, fought a lot of regional shows. This is a step up, but this is a big boy step up. This is a real fight.
It's honestly a decent card. And by the way, when I speak on Jake Paul and his fights and Chavez and whatever, I'm not telling anybody you shouldn't watch it. I'm not telling anybody you can't like it. I'm not saying it shouldn't exist. It's just not for me as a boxing guy. That's not what gets me excited. That's sort of a yawn matchup to me, because I know Chavez. I've seen Chavez fight 15 times, so it's like I know what I'm getting into with a matchup like that, but it is a good card.
I'm going to read off the rest of the card. You just kind of interrupt when you want to say your piece. We get the return of Raul Curiel after his Alexis Rocha draw. I believe it's the first time he's back in action.
He's a good fighter.
Good fighter. Also, first fight with Robert Garcia, I believe. We get Holly Holm, the former pro boxer, world champion, and UFC champion, fighting Yolanda Vega, which is a real contender. So we have Holly Holm basically coming in with a top contender right off of the rip. That's a real fight.
I haven't seen her in so long. I have no idea what she brings to the table anymore.
Yeah. So that's that. Then we have John Scrappy Ramirez on the undercard. I love a little Scrappy. I love his enthusiasm for the sport. He genuinely is passionate about taking good, hard fights, maybe to his detriment at times, but I love that about Scrappy. Here's another good fight. Victor Morales versus Rene Alvarado.
Love a little Rene Alvarado, bro.
Victor Morales, decorated amateur, slow moving in his career.
I mean, he's obviously the favorite and is likely to win, but Rene Alvarado is one of them guys. He's like a Gabe Rosado, a Glenn Johnson. Like, he's just always right in the mix. And don't let that record fool you, man. He's a Derek Chisora. He's all them guys.
I think this is a 50-50 type fight just because it's like, I think they're matching this card tough. Here's another one. Alex Gutierrez, I can't say his name. Alex the Alley Cat, who trains at the Long Beach gym with Ashton Silva's dad. He's taken on Vincent Avina, who used to train near me in Stockton. Now I believe he's out of the Salas gym, possibly. That's another 50-50 type fight because both are pretty unproven at this point.
It's a really good card and a really good bunch of matchups. Unfortunately, Lukey, I believe my pizza is here.
Your pizza is here. Okay, well, you dip out, and then I'll just say the last piece. So Dakota, say your last, your stuff, your goodbye, so you can get your pizza and where people can see you this week.
Always good to be here with you, my friend. Always good to be here with all of you guys. Go check out my my recap on ITR Boxing about the fight last night. It includes a little quick interview with Jahi Tucker, kind of immediate post-fight reactions, and we'll catch you next week. Okay, and I'm going to stay on for about 2 to 3 more minutes. Dakota's going to leave, and I will give you the rest of the stuff. So just in case you're a hardcore, you want to know. Welterweight Joel Iriarte, he's a really good fighter. He's going to be on this undercard, and junior flyweight Naomi Valle will also be featured on this card, and she's trying to be a pilot, so that's pretty cool. Shout out to Naomi Valle, sister of Yoka Valle. The last eventful card I want to talk about is on Triller TV this coming weekend. You can see the return of Jean Pascal against Mikhail Silak, and that is going to be a fight that is happening there. And Marcus Brown will be in the co-feature at cruiserweight. That is all the boxing. So to sum up this week, you can watch boxing, but most of the boxing will be behind a paywall. Deontay Wilder pay-per-view. Jake Paul will be on pay-per-view, although he has a huge fan base, and so does Wilder. And if you want to watch the Jean Pascal fight, I believe that's pay-per-view, or it is a Triller TV subscription. More and more we are going to get. We are going to get that. I will take some questions as we go. Did you mention Gor Yeritsyan's loss? I did mention it in my 360 promotions segment, and I will give you the timestamp, which will be annoying to those listening back. The timestamp for that is 39:14 is when I talked about that. I will also have the stream up. I'm going to stay on for 1 more minute. So if you have any more questions and want to see my going gray side hair that I keep looking at right there, it's going gray. Ask me a question or else I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much for just being involved tonight. We will be back next week. We might even go live after the Jake Paul fight, depending on what happens. Let me know in the comments what you would like to know. I want to throw out some ideas. So I have some ideas. One is George Kambosos a Hall of Famer is an idea for a video for the channel. Another idea is to do a video about Manny Pacquiao versus Gervonta Davis. Could that fight happen? I have some reaction videos I'm going to work on this week. Tons of stuff coming to the channel. Doesn't look like any more questions to ask. I appreciate everybody that listened to the show. If you're listening via YouTube, subscribe to the channel. If you want to see more content like this,
Be sure to check it out. If you're listening on Substack, tell a friend to tell a friend. Let's try to get that up. And if you're listening on YouTube, please leave a comment, because the comments get us more viewership and distribution, because we're trying to get into the boxing algorithm. So if you type in boxing on the podcast apps, we can be one of the podcasts people look for. Really help if you could do that. Thank you once again, and we are out.